A reading from 1 Samuel chapter 3, starting in the first verse. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli. The word of the Lord was rare in those days, and visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was laying down in his room. The lamp of God had not yet gone out. And Samuel was lying in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called, Samuel, Samuel. And he said, Here I am. And he ran to Eli, Here I am, for you called me. And he said, I did not call you. Lie down again. So he went and lay down, and the Lord called again, Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call you, my son, lie down. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again a third time, and he got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. Then Eli perceived that the boy was being called to by the Lord. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, Go lie down, and if he calls, you shall say, Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So Samuel went and lay down in his place, and the Lord came and stood there. And calling as before, he said, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, Speak, for your servant is listening. Then the Lord said to Samuel, See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make both ears of anyone who hears of it tingle. On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. For I have told him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear the house of Eli, that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be expiated by sacrifice or offering forever. Karl Barth, famous theologian, was in a streetcar in Basel, Switzerland one day when a man came down, sat next to him. He said, Are you new in town? Are you visiting? And the man said, Yep, just got here today. He said, If there's one thing you could do or someone you could meet here, who would it be? And he said, I'd really like to meet the famous theologian Karl Barth. Do you know him? And Barth said, Yeah, I give him a shave every day. The ride finished, the man got off the streetcar, and he walked into his hotel, and he exclaimed to his wife, Hey, I met Karl Barth's barber today. How often do we sit next to other believers, eat with them, sing with them, talk with them, yet fail to see the God-given gifts that are inside of them? Fail to know and to understand that we're in their presence. Maybe God is trying to speak to us through them. How often do we meet a stranger? We don't even know this person. And maybe we have a chance to interact with them and be gifted with their words. But because we're distracted, we miss out on a chance to know somebody and their gifts. Nearly 3 centuries ago, Søren Kierkegaard said that if he were a doctor and were allowed to prescribe just one remedy for all the ills of the modern world, he would prescribe silence. For even if the word of God were proclaimed, he said, in today's world, it would not be heard or heeded. There's too much noise and busyness in the world. Life is full of noise, both outward and inward, that can truly impede our ability to truly listen to what God is calling us to do. What an apt message for today. That's true of us also. Our world is so full of noise, so much noise. Noise on television, noise in the groups that we belong to, the social clubs, the church. So many people saying so many different things, and so many people not being willing to listen to what other people have to say. In this text, we find Samuel laying down in the temple. Eli's retired for the evening, and Samuel hears the voice of God. And he immediately thinks it's Eli, and he runs to him and he says, "Here I am. What do you need?" Eli says, "Well, I really don't need anything. I didn't call you. Go and lay down." He does it again, and you can sense a little bit of frustration in Eli when he says, "Listen, I didn't call you. Go and lie down again." And then the third time, Eli gets it. He understands that God is calling to the boy. And he instructs him to go lay down and say, "Here I am, for your servant is listening." And in doing so, he receives the word of the Lord. You know, in this reading, Eli's first response is quite often our first response. Did you ever feel like you know what somebody's going to say? Your spouse, your children, close friend, family member, and you respond to them before you listen? Have you ever assumed that you know what someone's going to say, that you cut them off and say, "I don't want to hear it"? I have. I think we all have. Have you ever been so enamored with your own agenda that instead of truly listening to someone in a dispute, you spend most of your time during the discourse formulating your response instead of hearing somebody out? I do that. Here's the catch. What if in that discussion with child, spouse, or good friend, God is trying to speak to you? You will not hear it if you're more intent on your own thoughts and speaking them than you are listening to the other person. And you certainly won't hear it if you take the attitude of, "I don't want to hear it." Can we be prepared to hear the voice of God and say, "Here I am, Lord. Your servant is listening." In this age of us and them, in this age of I'm right and you're wrong, in this age of I only want to hear arguments from my own perspective, we have lost the art of listening to each other, and is creating huge divides between us, friends and family. You know, we have a chance right now, when we're stuck at home, when we're spending a lot more time alone in the quiet, a lot more time surrounded by the trappings of our own life. We have a chance. We have a chance to connect with people and to listen. You know, it's important for us to resist an initial decision that says either right out loud and to the point, or by us not listening and formulating a response that I really don't want to hear what someone else has to say. I think that because of all the noise in our world, that we are growing very closely to the point where the lack of interpersonal communication among people has caused us to lose the art of listening. See, when we're on the computer, or we're on Facebook, or we're watching TV, or we're even emailing people, or texting people, we don't have that eye contact. We can't hear somebody's voice. We can't hear the inflection in their tone. How often have you tried in a text to figure out what the other person was feeling? That's what's caused the absolute explosion of emojis in this world. Emojis that started with dashes and dots on the keyboard. And now when you get your new phone, You have an emoji keyboard that has hundreds and hundreds sometimes of different symbols meant to convey emotion. You know, it's important in understanding each other to be able to have the opportunity to listen to each other, even if we don't agree. Empathetic listening may not change your view, but it may help you to understand the person you're talking to, understand their side in their discourse, and see them in a human light. If we as a church and a country, even as members of a nuclear family unit, want to lay hold of the unity that's at the heart of the gospel, want to come together with other people and make a difference in this world, we cannot be afraid to enter into dialogue with those who we disagree. We cannot be afraid to listen for the voice of God within those discussions. If we refuse to listen for his voice in such situations, just like Samuel, we will not recognize it even if it is plain as day. More importantly, however, we need to start looking at people not as how we see them, but as how God sees them. That is, as children of the Most High, called, sanctified, and sealed by his love. In order to look at them this way, we need to listen to them with such an attitude. When we can begin to see everyone in such a light, says Karl Barth, we come close to touching the heart of the Most High God. Social distancing doesn't have to be social isolation. Boy, the new word. I encourage you all during this time that you will spend and I will spend more time in quiet in our own homes, in contemplation. Take the time out to call family or friends 2 to 3 times a day, to catch up with them, to connect with someone you haven't connected to in a while. Take the time to intentionally listen to them, not seeking to formulate a response, but truly listening to what they have to say. Ask questions. Be interested. Listen for God's gift and God's voice in them. Truly appreciate who God created them to be. Truly engage and encourage them as a child of God. Help to discover their God-given gifts, and you give them your God-given gifts through intentional listening. You see, we need each other. The world tells us right now, well, we don't need each other, or we only need people who believe the same things we do, act the same way we do, are passionate about only the things we're passionate about. The world, in the state that it's in, doesn't encourage us to be with each other, truly with each other. Similarities, differences, and all. We have a chance to change that. We have a chance to reach out. We have a chance to be with people, even when we can't be with people. How do we do this? We reach out, we talk, and we listen. And in listening to each other, we begin to learn what it's like to listen to God. How can we listen to God? Easy. Number one, like I just said, listen to each other. Within the church, we want to always agree, but we can avoid much wasted emotional baggage if we practice the art of listening. Not only today, but in everyday life. More time practicing listening to one another will actually begin to pay off when we actually begin to hear what the other person is saying. Second, be silent. Eli sent Samuel back to his bed to be quiet so that he could hear. We need to take time each day to listen and clarify our thoughts. Take time each day to rest your mind. Enter your quiet place and find God in the silence, just like Elijah did. It's easier to discern our spiritual path and vision when we take time to listen. Many times a solution to a problem arises once we stop searching for it and we begin to rest. We wrestle with the problem all day long and then we go to sleep. And when we get to sleep, it's like all of a sudden we wake up with that eureka feeling and it feels good. It should. But maybe, just maybe, God is slipping something into us during our sleep that we were too busy to hear when we were awake. Don't let the noise of the world rob you of the joy of your personal relationship with Jesus Christ and rob you of the joy of an interpersonal relationship to your friends and your family and your neighbors. Be silent with God. Take time to pray and take time to listen. Maybe even start that time with these words. Here I am, Lord, your servant is listening. Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for your presence with us. Lord, in these uncertain times, help us to connect and reach out to those whom we love. Maybe those whom we haven't talked to in a long time, to speak to them and listen to them, to connect with them. And in doing so, Lord, may we more deeply connect to you as we connect to each other. Amen. I'll see you next time.